Hello, and welcome to the second ever episode of the revamped Music Mate series that we've been doing, focusing on 80s albums. We had pretty big boots to fill, I thought, after the first episode, which I think started off really strong with my favourite Talking Heads album, a really significant album of the 80s. And we've I won't go into too much detail too early, but it's certainly, this album that I've picked today is certainly not going to reach the peak of that album. I think 1981 in particular was quite a difficult year for me for choice. I had a look at quite a few albums. I listened to quite a few albums. I think probably the most well-known ones from 1981 are Moving Pictures by Rush and Tattoo You by the Rolling Stones. And I listened to both of them and they didn't really, I wasn't really feeling it. I didn't feel like there was enough to talk about. I also listened to Juju by Sushi and the Banshees, and I really liked that album quite a lot. But again, I didn't think there was enough complexity or substance to the album to really make a whole podcast out of. I listened to Ghost in the Machine by The Police. That was another consideration, but again, very far from my favourite Police album. So there were really quite a few kind of albums I was sort of mulling over and wanted to choose between. I went with an album by a band that I really liked before listening to this album. And I've written here in my notes that I'm pretty sure I found the most interesting, detailed and ear-catching album of the year, which goes to show that I really did write these notes a while ago. Because I have listened to this album a few times since the first listen, and my opinions have changed a little bit. But we'll definitely get onto that at some point soon. Before revealing the album, as I always like to try and do, I wanted to talk a bit about the band, what they're known for, and we can go from there. Does that sound good to you guys?
That sounds
Yep,
great.
yep.
Brilliant. So the band of which the album I've chosen today that made it is the London-born band called King Crimson. They are one of the earliest examples and perhaps most commonly the band that springs to mind when talking about very old forms of prog rock music from the kind of 60s and 70s era, outside of maybe Pink Floyd probably being the most famous band from that kind of genre. And they're not really a mainstream outfit of the 80s or any decade really, but they've definitely developed a listening base over time and looked back on in retrospect as a band that made very good music, were ahead of their time, and inspired a range of bands interested in creating, mathematically minded rock music, as I guess we more commonly call it math rock music, art rock music, and as I mentioned, prog rock music. And to call them a prog rock band really isn't doing them justice. They have so many different influences, from classical music to English folk to jazz, plenty of genres like that. And though a lot of that might not be as present on this particular album that we're talking about, it is definitely on quite a few others. So King Crimson started off in the mid to late 60s as a prototype band with just 3 members and a seemingly ever-changing lineup. By 1969, the year of their debut album, the band was more stable, consisting of 4 members, and these members were Robert Fripp, Greg Lake, Ian MacDonald and Michael Giles, with Peter Sinfield as their lyricist. And their debut album, called In the Court of the Crimson King, was certainly new and very different from the norm. It had reasonable commercial success in the UK, and it did okay in the US, but wouldn't really be recognised as a standout album from the 60s until years and years later. And it's by far the group's most well-known and beloved album. It has this really memorable album cover that I'm sure you guys will have seen at some point, even if you haven't listened to the album, that just looks like a painting of someone's face very close up, the so-called Crimson King screaming in horror at something. Over their long career, they continued to have a lot of frequent lineup changes and albums that looked like they might never materialise, with Robert Fripp at the heart of the band's operations. Until the mid-70s, they carried on releasing material until there seemed to be a permanent hiatus. And by the 80s, Fripp, along with bassist Tony Levin, guitarist Adrian Belew, and the drummer from Yes, actually, Bill Bruford, they formed a group called Discipline, with the intention of producing new music. And by the time of the album's release, they were back to being called King Crimson. But they kept the original group's name as the album. This quartet would go on to make 2 more albums in a similar vein in the 80s, being able to tell from the album covers anyway. There's some kind of thematic link that probably brings them together in a vague sort of trilogy. Over the rest of the band's career, there would prove to be many more live performances, compilations, and a few more studio albums with, as you might guess, many, many more lineup changes. And I thought Fleetwood Mac were bad when it comes to lineup changes. I'm really not sure actually how Robert Fripp was able to stay sane all the years, constantly having to re-glue his band back together. Although maybe he welcomed the opportunity to play with so many different musicians. I mean, do you guys think you'd be able to play in a rock band or any kind of band that changes a lineup once a year and basically becomes a different band each time?
Yeah, I don't think I could do that because I don't know how to play any instruments.
Well, I guess that certainly doesn't help, right?
We should start doing that as a podcast. Each year, it's a completely different lineup.
Bring the Deets back.
The Deets in it, yeah. Well, I'm glad it's not like a Ship of Theseus problem because it sounds like they have the core of this guy Rob Fripp.
Yeah,
that is like the soul that stays the same the whole time.
Yeah, it's similar with Fleetwood Mac having
Mick Fleetwood, I want to say.
Yeah,
because that's where the name of the band comes from, right? The drummer.
Yeah.
That's what I thought. Yeah, no, I mean, you guys are definitely right. There has been one guy kind of holding it all together since their first album, and it sort of makes sense because, like I've talked about, the lineup has changed so much, and as a result, their sound has evolved decade by decade quite astronomically. But also, there is still a little bit of, I guess, what you would call King Crimson's DNA in, well, especially the albums that I've heard and some of the other couple of songs that I've heard on their other albums. I mean, I can't admit to being a massive King Crimson fan. I've only listened to the 2 albums, their debut and the one that we're reviewing today. But by all accounts, a lot of their 70s material is really, really good as well. Do you guys want to talk a little bit about what you thought of the album on first listen, second listens, things you liked, things you didn't like? Because I don't want to hijack the podcast as I normally do and just talk about me when it comes to music. So, yeah.
Well, you're the key music mate, and we're just the members that can get slotted in and out as time progresses.
Or is it Ethan's podcast and we are the titular music mates? Ethan and his music mates.
I can't really remember. I'm pretty sure that the name just came from a remark my dad made once.
Yeah, because we were playing... Oh, we've gone off topic immediately. We were playing some kind of game that's like charades, where you write things down and have to act them out or draw them or whatever. And I had written down music notes, and in my terrible handwriting, your dad read it and was like, "God, music mates, is that what you bloody guys are?" That's an impression of your dad. And that's the
just
moniker.
like him.
The moniker stuck ever since. But anyway, Discipline OG to be exact, because we're listening to the proper version of it. I was listening to this album while playing some RuneScape because they did a promotion where old players could come back for like cheap, on the cheap, get some double experience in. So I was grinding away, trying to level up my agility, listening to this song. And that's already a really harsh experience, considering it's a very boring, monotonous activity in a game where the only gameplay is you click on things. So that's the bar, that's the mood going in. And I don't know, I think I was setting Discipline off on the wrong foot there, because I was like kind of zoning out, but in not like a chill out way, like, oh man, I'm relaxed, zoning out, just kind of like losing consciousness kind of way, listening to this album and trying to climb across various obstacle courses to get my agility experience up. So yeah, so that's kind of where I came into this. I don't know what you guys were doing. What RuneScape skills were you leveling while you listen to this album?
By funeral care skills.
Well, they have necromancy as a new skill.
Close
enough.
Actually, well, first, I'm not really bringing the dead back to life in my role, but yeah, no. So I had it on in the background whilst doing work, which I think fits a bit better because there's more kind of taking up my mind and what it's doing than just kind of clicking things on a screen. Yeah, I guess some of my feeling is if I was a different person, this album would work for sitting in a dark room and I just pay attention to it and hear what it does with the soundscape. But I'm not that person, so I'd find that boring. I think it does work well as a background thing if you've got something else kind of going on, and then just kind of dip in and out and sort of have that background. I don't know, excitement, turmoil. It's certainly interesting.
I see what you mean. I think that we had a similar experience to it where when we were listening to the album, I think on the drive up to yours recently, Johnny, we had this on in the background, and I think Harry commented on the fact that this makes quite good driving music in the sense that he's busy concentrating on something and it kind of takes up the space around him in a way.
Yeah.
But it's not like... I think my first experience listening to this album was the kind of stuff that you were talking about, Johnny, which to me I think is the appeal of King Crimson, which is their music is fairly complicated. And what I mean by complicated is that if you're looking at things like guitar riffs, they're always really sharp and precise and very tightly wound together, and you kind of walk away from the music feeling like everyone that participated in creating that music and putting it together seems to be on the same page. Everything seems really well rehearsed and planned and methodical and quite meticulous in a lot of ways. And that there are even some passages, especially in the kind of earlier songs, that almost feel a bit dizzying in a way, like they take your head for a spin because the riffs are being played with so much speed and there's so many notes being played in quick succession. It's very technical music and I guess virtuoso playing, which I think is a key part of sort of the earlier prog rock music. But in creating music like that, I also think it means that you've got to be like you said, you've got to be a specific kind of person, and I think you've got to be in a specific kind of mood to really enjoy this kind of music. Because like I said, when I first listened to it, I really, really enjoyed this album, and it's not like now I dislike it or anything. I just like it less, and it's because some of the things that kind of leapt out to me when I first listened to it now become grievances and annoyances, and it's almost like they're trying to overcomplicate things a little bit too much at times when they're putting the music together, and it doesn't kind of work for me as well as it did on a first listen. Though I don't know if that kind of resonates with you at all, or in fact any of you, what I've just said in that way.
Yeah, I definitely agree that it's got a very technical sound. I think it's certainly like impressive from that point of view. I do quite like I think math rock is the accurate label. I've only ever heard it like used. I don't really know what it means. But
Sorry,
I think
did you say prog or math? I didn't quite
math.
hear that.
I meant math. I might have said prog.
Yeah, when you said math rock in the intro, I did want to be like, what the fuck is math rock? I've never heard this term said
Well,
before.
it's like I guess with all genres of music, you have a lot of umbrella terms like pop and hip hop and rock, and then under all of those you have, just hundreds and hundreds of different genres, and I think prog rock and math rock are definitely genres that are in a similar vein, in the sense that with a lot of math rock is a very rhythmic focused style of rock music, and if you're looking at the two, often a lot of the overlap comes down to you'll get a lot of music that's very ambitious, as I said, overly complicated. You get a lot of songs that are quite long, that go on for a bit. There's a lot of irregular time signatures and a lot of tempo changes and things like that. And there's a lot of, I guess, sporadic starting and stopping. I mean, if you think, Harry, of something like 21st Century Schizoid Man, and you think about, I don't even want to call it a bridge section when it's most of the song, but basically the parts of the song that go on for 4 or 5 minutes, where it's just kind of riffs played on riffs, and there's a lot of intricacies and a lot of abrupt starting and stopping, and it's kind of orchestral in that way. That's a key component of, I guess, prog rock and math rock, and if you're looking at a band like Pink Floyd in particular, Pink Floyd are known for making songs that go on for 15 minutes, 20 minutes. I mean, they really try and create songs that, you know, I guess take you on a journey and really stretch the passage of time in a way. And that's kind of I guess that's a key component of those genres of music.
Okay. Yeah, I kind of see that and also hear that in when I'm listening to King Crimson.
Sorry, Harry, I didn't mean to butt you off there. Were you?
Right. I was just going to say the one thing about the album I really wanted to say that you got there first was talking about these intricate guitar riffs, because that was a comment I heard you saying, Ethan. I thought I want to steal that for the podcast.
I think Tony's plan was to steal it as well from memory when we talked about it in the car. Yeah, I do think this album isn't just intricate guitar parts and I guess complex riffs. There are songs on the album that are a bit more ambient and a bit more atmospheric, and I guess experimental in a way. And I do think though that the song has some kind of balancing issues, especially with the last two songs, which I'll get onto a little bit later. I do like the fact that generally you start off with a song that's a bit more punchy or a bit more immediate, a bit more, I guess, kind of rock oriented, and then you get this more sort of soundscape song that comes after it that's about, I guess, like, I don't even know how to put it. I guess building a world in your mind. You know, I think I think, for example, something like I think the song's called Mate Kudasai. I might not be saying that correctly. Is the third song on the album, and it starts off with these really nice kind of ethereal guitar. I think guitar sounds that sound a little bit like a seagull, for example. And it plays throughout the song, and it really gives the track this sort of, I don't know, like beach hideout feel to it in a way. And I think some of those songs do work quite well. The ones, like I said, that aren't so riff heavy and riff driven, and more about building something that's a bit more, I guess, spiritual and a bit more, I guess, passive in a way. But I don't know if you guys preferred those songs, or if you preferred the ones that had a bit more of an adrenaline kick to them.
Well, I have a bit of an opinion for Elephant Talk, where it was the one that, as I was listening to the album over and over again, I started to like it less and less, and eventually it got to the point where I'm like, I just started skipping it each time. I think it's mostly just like the vocals that just started to grate on me.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's entirely like, I know that's just like us thing that I'm just like subjective. Like, I just didn't like the texture of it, the quality of it. Whereas we just came off the last album we did, like Talking Heads or whatever, which had kind of the similar sort of same like spoken word singing that I just liked a lot better when in that time for just arbitrary reasons. But yeah, it was just one that I was like, I'm just gonna start the album with Frame by Frame, which had this interesting effect of like, okay, I'm starting it with Frame by Frame, and the last two songs as instrumental tracks, as I'm sure Ethan will get into. So there's basically only like 4 songs in this album. This is very skinny, very light. So I guess that's kind of contributes to me like thinking like, oh, I like 1 or 2 songs on this album that I'm like, these are good songs. But that's like, I don't know. I feel like if it's an album, I can't just say it's a good album just because of 1 or 2 songs that I like, even if that's like 50% of the songs, basically, by percentage.
I kind of agree with you, Tony. I mean, my experience of this, I think I've heard this album maybe 4 times now. And partially that's because we kept pushing back when we're actually going to do this podcast. But the first time I listened to it, I was in a very bad mood. And I guess Elephant Talk is a song I don't particularly like, similar to you, because I just don't, the vocals don't really work for me. And I think it really sets me off on the wrong foot with the album. Because Frame by Frame I do like as a song, but I think it's a little bit too long. And coming off Elephant Talk into Frame by Frame, and it just going on forever, it definitely doesn't endear me to the album. That being said, having heard it 4 times, I think I have liked it more every time I've listened to it. So I've got the opposite experience that Ethan's having. I'm like draining his enjoyment of it and stealing it for myself.
I think when it comes to reviewing an album and listening to an album from front to back, I mean, you've got to nail the opening track, right? That's quite an important thing. I think you've got to start well and end well, and I guess you can have kind of mid songs in the sort of middle section, and the album you can still walk away from the album still having enjoyed it. But I think it becomes a little bit more challenging if the opening song and the finale don't really appeal to you as much. I definitely see what you guys are saying about the vocal style. I don't want to just turn this into a Talking Heads podcast, which we kind of do, what feels like with a lot of things that we talk about nowadays. But the vocal style does remind me of Burn a little bit in certain songs, and just how slippery it can be at times, and how I guess obscure and sort of random it can be at times as well. And I think on Elephant Talk, it certainly is keeping you at arm's reach a little bit with the singing, whereas Frame by Frame is sung in a bit more of a conventional way, which I think definitely benefits it quite a lot. And Frame by Frame is definitely my favourite song on the album. I do really like the way that the song kind of kicks off. There are these sort of two riffs that are kind of playing off of one another, one that's really really rapid and one that's a bit more reserved, and it's a running theme that plays throughout the song. There's also another passage in the song that I remember that I also really like, where again it's two guitar parts that are completely in sync rhythmically with one another on top of each other, that are layered, and then as they're playing forward in the song they become unsynced, and it's quite a nice detail that almost comes across a little bit trippy. I don't know if there were any songs that you guys listened to on the album that had nice moments, or that you liked the vibe of in particularly, that you wanted to talk about a little bit.
Yeah, I guess possibly it's just a sign that I didn't listen to it enough, that I'd never really got to the point of telling the songs apart. So for me, it is just one, I don't know, together cohesive experience. Because I was sort of going to say, to your earlier question about the more frantic and dueling songs against the more subdued and slower ones, that I don't think I could really weigh one up against each other, because it's all part of the kind of, I don't know, I'm going to sound pretentious for an album I don't even really like. Like, I don't know, broiling flow of it all, where it's sort of like you get, I don't know, you do kind of need those pieces, and it's moments coming up and moments coming back. That said, if I was approaching it from more of a song oriented thing, I probably would then just be saying, oh no, these are the good ones, get rid of the rest. Yeah, so there's no particular song, I think, that, I mean, yeah, there's moments. So listening to Indiscipline now, and I repeat myself when under stress, that's a distinctive moment. Yeah, I feel like I do remember quite liking some of the stuff going on with those last two instrumental songs. I can't remember specifics.
That's fair enough. In terms of the last two instrumental songs, I don't mind them, and I think they are interesting. I think the Sheltering Sky in particular is interesting. But it really, for me, struggles to keep the momentum going. I don't have the track list in front of me in terms of length, but I'm pretty sure the Sheltering Sky is the last one. And when I say that it struggles to keep the momentum going, I don't mean that in terms of intensity at all, because it's not an intense song. I just mean in keeping you interested.
It's 8 minutes 22.
8 minutes 22, yeah. From what I remember of it, it settles on a vibe really early on. There's this kind of nice gentle patter of drums. There's this really kind of calming set of clean guitar chords, and some nice synths on the song as well, that basically kick it off to a good start. But if you contrast it again, I'll bring it back to Talking Heads, Born Under Punches, which was my favourite song on the album that we reviewed on the last episode. For me, again, it's a song that doesn't really develop instrumentally, kind of like how The Sheltering Sky does, but for me, Born Under Punches, what it captures is something that's so much more vivid and captivating, and even though it's not 8 minutes long, it has this unbelievable hook about it that instantly pulls me in, and the hook is so good that I'm kept reeled in for the 6 minutes that the song lasts for, whereas with The Sheltering Sky, it's a bit of a snooze fest after, 2 or 3 minutes of listening to what effectively feels like is something that's not really developing, and if it's not developing and it's not hooking, then I just kind of want to go on to the last song on the album, which is Discipline. And when you consider these two songs together, maybe I'm just being really nitpicky here, and I'm the only person that would have a problem with this, but I don't like that the song ends with 2 instrumentals. I didn't mind it on the first time I listened to it, because I was still kind of taking the whole album in and I wasn't really analysing it like I was on my second or third listen. But ending an album with 2 instrumentals is something that just doesn't work for me. It feels a bit off kilter, like it lacks some kind of balance. And in a way, I do like that the final track highlights for me what I like about King Crimson, which is really meticulous, dancing, quite playful melodies that kind of weave in and out of each other and manage to sustain some level of potency, I guess. But it's 2 songs that ultimately leave me feeling like they kind of belong in an art gallery that you could admire for its intricacies, which I've talked about quite a bit on the podcast, but they don't really grab me, and I don't know why you would end the album with 2 instrumentals. It just makes me feel like the whole experience kind of peters out on something that feels quite flat. And I don't know if you guys feel the same way. It sounds like Harry does.
I find that very interesting, because to me, especially with the style of like singing going on here, all of these songs feel like instrumentals to me, because they aren't sung traditionally. So it feels separate from, I don't know, that kind of distinction. Like the voice is being used in a way that's just a kind of another voice. So it doesn't necessarily feel that it's missing something. I don't know. I just find that weird. I guess the idea that an instrumental is lesser.
It's hard for me to rationalise, I'll say that. It's not like I can really sit down and put together a really, really compelling argument for why ending an album with 2 instrumentals is a bit weird and doesn't, and like I said, just feels a bit flat for me. I think it's just kind of a mindset that you need to have, or that you have to have, really. But if that's not how you feel, then that's good too. And I'm glad that it sounds like you like these last 2 songs more than I do. Anyway,
I just don't. I don't separate anything from each other in this album. is part of it.
I mean, I definitely agree. I think it's partially about the kind of pace and the the tone of the songs. I think The Sheltering Sky, which is the penultimate one, and is obviously, like most songs on this album, far too long. It's a song that grew on me a lot in my most recent listen. That it is quite relaxing and something I could see myself going back to at the end of. I think what highlights it more is the fact that probably the most memorable song on the album is before these 2 tracks. So you almost have the most memorable song lyrically.
But you have the most compelling reason to want him to shut up.
Yeah, like Gingy. And then suddenly you just have silence. That I think makes it stand out more for me.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Harry agreeing with Ethan that ending without the vocal was. I think this is probably just the way I can remember music is I'm not very good at remembering how a song goes if it doesn't have vocals in it. So to me the experience of listening to an album is the important part is what songs am I looking forward to next. And with me, it's oh, okay, well, I don't really remember what it's like after Thello and Gingy. If they were playing right now, I'd be yeah, that's nice. But now I'm I literally have listened to it 6 or 7 times and could not tell you anything about either of them. Maybe I should be on a music podcast, but oh well.
I guess that sounds like my attitude with classical music, where I'm just how am I supposed to remember Bach's Opera 92 Suite 3? That's the one where it goes but yeah. So I don't know, because I don't know. For me, it's less about these songs, but just thinking of instrumentals in general, where I can sometimes find them a lot more compelling than songs with lyrics, especially when they've got weird names that make you sit down and go, "Why the hell have you called it this?" So, yeah. No, I mean, anyway, I'm just approaching from an interest of the idea that them being two instrumentals is the reason for it falling flat.
Did you actually like the album, John?
No. But here's the other thing, where for me, I don't, because you're sort of coming as well from the point of being like, oh, and Talking Heads did it in a way that was interesting, where I'm just like, none of them have done it in a way that's interesting. My kind of jokey review of it is it's just noise, it's babble, bedlam, bewailing, boisterousness, buzz. It's just noise, caterwailing, clang, clatter, cacophony, clamour, commotion. It's just noise, din, discord, disquiet, drumming.
Those sound like lyrics from
elephant noise.
One of the songs, actually.
That's the joke. I've opened up synonyms for the word noise, and I've just started reading them out. Has it made the song better?
I noticed it was in alphabetical, but okay.
Yeah.
It's
also how it's done on the song.
I think I kind of can see why someone wouldn't like this album. Like, part of me wants to hate it almost, but
why?
When I listen, because it's like. If I hated it, that would at least be like an interesting stance. For me, my take on the album is like, I listen to it and I like it, but I'm also like, I find it like a very inoffensive kind of style. Whereas if I could like point at it and be like, this is the part that I hate, that would be like, oh, I'm like forming an opinion around the details of the album. Instead, I feel like I'm reacting to it very passively.
Okay, I see where you're coming from, but I'm glad that you liked this album and it was a net positive, because I don't. It honestly at times does feel like anything that I ever suggest or recommend Johnny, he's not going to like, and there's nothing I can do about it. But I still want you guys to like the things that I pick and that I choose, and if you don't like it, you don't like it, and that's fine. But I would rather that you like it and feel innocuous about it, rather than being able to point at it and say, "That's the part I hate. That's what's so bad about
Yeah.
it."
I feel like I should, because I for comedic effect, just answer a no to Harry's question, where like, I'm close to Tony. I'm just like, yeah, it's all right, it's there. But I think the interesting difference is, compared to you guys, that for me has it on that same rung as Talking Heads, where clearly there is more of that difference for you guys.
The Talking Heads thing is really interesting, because from the first time I listened to the album, like mid first listen, I just had this question of like, there's clearly something about this that's similar. Not like, obviously it's an album that came a year after Talking Heads. We've just done Talking Heads on the podcast. Maybe it's just on my mind, but like, no, there is a texture to the quality that is Talking Heads like. I can't understand why it doesn't appeal to me in the same way, and I don't know if I've put my finger on it.
Well, Harry, I think what it probably comes down to more is that there's a very big difference, at least to me anyway, between type of songs that you get on Remain and Light and the type of songs that you get on Speaking in Tongues, which I know is the album that you prefer and that you like the songs more of. And on Speaking in Tongues, the music is so jumpy and fun and danceable and silly and goofy, and it has a lot of these great qualities that make it incredibly memorable and fun. And I would say that that's quite a bit different to the music on Discipline, which I would say is closer to Remain in Light. And I know that you like Remain in Light, but I know that there's a side of Talking Heads that you definitely prefer on Speaking in Tongues, so maybe that's what it comes down to.
I think just possibly. It's definitely something about the vocal delivery as well. Like there's like a weirdness to David Byrne's voice that works more for me than this vocalist. I mean, even like, there are some songs like in Discipline where you've got the kind of speaking and quiet and then riff. Which I think is an interesting idea, but it just goes on for too long. It's the same idea kind of repeated, and I think that's possibly the thing with the album. I don't think it, for me anyway, mixes it up enough. I think the riffs are very intricate and very cool, but then they'll just go on and on and on to the point I've sort of got the idea, and then I look down and there's like 3 more minutes left of the song.
That's such a good way of that's such a good way of putting it.
I guess some Talking Heads songs would be about 2 minutes long, and even the ones that are 5-6 minutes, they'll change up multiple times and always kind of keep me interested. There's something in it that will keep me coming back.
For me, it's definitely those more atmospheric, I guess, soothing songs on the album, like The Sheltering Sky, where obviously it's not helped by the fact that it's 8 minutes, but I am just kind of sat there thinking, please do something different, because you're kind of lulling me into sleep here. Yeah. Going back quickly to, I don't want to talk about this too long, because I feel like we've talked about this point to death, but going back to the final 2 songs on the album, it is that there's 2 instrumentals rather than 1. I don't mind the final song being an instrumental, because for me, the final song on an album, I think, has to kind of either end with a bang in a way, or try and do something different that provide something refreshing, I guess. And when I look at albums that we reviewed in the past on this podcast for the 90s series, something like the final song on Weezer's debut album Only in Dreams, or even The Tourist on OK Computer, for very different reasons, I think they make good finales, because they either provide something different that's kind of that's just different, that's a nice change of pace, or they end with an explosion. And I don't think this album does that for the finale. And I also think it's just weird that it ends with 2 instrumentals. It just it's I guess it's more of a tick than anything for me.
Can't let it go.
Yeah, I get that it sounds weird when I actually talk about it out
No,
loud.
it definitely makes sense. It definitely makes sense. And also, it's definitely not helped by the fact that it's two instrumental songs that are combined 13 minutes long.
God, when you put it
Because
like
it's
that,
like,
T.
yeah, and also I definitely agree with Harry and also Ethan, that the sense of like, oh, just do something interesting, please, is like compounded by the fact that there's just not much like different like variation on the theme in the album because it's so short. It's simultaneously like in terms of song listings, right? Like there's like 5 actual vocal songs, and I know that's just me that considers them like a higher class of being worth of remembering. But still,
Tony, we're both trying to cleanse those 2 final songs from the annals of history.
But you're cleansing the 2
sorry.
final songs. I'm cleansing the first song. There's like 4 songs in the album. And like, to be fair, I do really like Mata Kudasai. I think that there's a great atmosphere in it that's like chill and relaxed. And I also quite like Telehun Jinji, which is like the standout of the album in my opinion. I'm looking at it and I really like it. And I definitely love this kind of like religious, like spiritual quality to it. For when we were first talking about it, we had the discussion of like, what does that mean? And I was so convinced in my head that it was a name, because they're saying it like it's like this person who's done like mythological like deeds. The way they're like chanting his name. Apparently it's just an anagram of something. Oh well. So yeah, I do like those 2 songs. I don't know. It just feels like for any other album, like if there were only 2 songs on it I liked, I would be like, ugh, it's not good. But that's because most other albums are like 10 proper songs long. This one, it's like, I don't know, it's almost like not enough food to be considered a whole course, if that makes sense. It's kind of like
Happy meal.
It's a happy meal. Yeah, I guess. Yeah. Maybe that's a weird way of looking at it. I feel like if I was reviewing the songs individually, I'd be coming at it from a lot more positive note. But as an album experience, I'm like, I'm kind of fence sitting on it.
Are you guys happy to move on to conclusions and giving the album a rating out of 10?
Yeah.
I think so. Unless you want to tell the anecdote about what Felon Jinjit means.
Oh, Harry, you know what? I've fucking forgotten.
Fair enough. I mean,
Heat in the Jungle. Yeah, that's
it was one of those things where what really stood out to me in that song was the kind of spoken most like throughout the song you kind of hear someone telling a story. And it's not vocals, and then we ended up looking up kind of what it meant. And it was him having the story about like an encounter he had on the streets when he was in London, I think. which is pretty interesting. I mean, I thought it was also about like something mystical, like it's got Jin in, so I just assumed
maybe that's
about,
just
like,
it.
like a genie or something.
Yeah, maybe that's just what it is.
So, who wants to go first? Because I want to keep the tradition of myself ending last, considering I'm the host, which means I probably should go first, but I'm not going to do that.
Okay, I'll go first. I've been kind of going back and forth on this. I think it is like a bit unfair to be like, well, to like in a sense like mark it down because it's a short album. Because like on one hand, like that gives it the flaw of like it doesn't really have the chance to explore like a wider sort of range of variations on its theme. But on the other hand, it does spaff all of the time it does have on 8 minutes of the sheltering. And even Telehun Jinji, which is good, is like 6.5 minutes long, which it just doesn't need to be. But then I'm also like, no, Meta Kudasai is really good, and like if I was looking at it from the other end of like, well, it's not just like short, it's like a more concentrated experience. You only get like a little burst, keep you going while you're getting to level 75 agility. Got it, by the way. So yeah, in another note, this album, I'm gonna give it a 6 out of 10. I do quite like the sort of atmosphere in some of the songs. Mata Kudasai, I think, really gives this cool, I want to say like Japanese math rock kind of chillaxed beach vibe. Um, but yeah, I don't know. There wasn't enough to like get me hyped, get me excited.
Cool. Harry, Johnny, which of you wants to go next?
Yeah, I'll go. I think the fact that I only ever really listened to it as a background piece has probably helped. Yeah, I mean it's good. It's all right. It's music. I think don't remember from last time. What I'm doing is basically just giving things 5 out of 10. So unless it's good, then it's a 10 out of 10, and unless it's bad, then it's a 1 out of 10. But this is an album. It's 5 out of 10.
I think I'm going to have to agree with Johnny and give it a 5 out of 10. As I said, I've listened to it more times than I thought I would, and it does grow on me every time. But I also think part of that is because I paying it less attention every time. Which in a weird way it is a strength of the album. You can kind of switch off and just let it kind of wash over you, and it's very inoffensive in that way. It's interesting though because as part of this I did listen to the kind of debut album of King Crimson and the Court of the Crimson King from the 60s, and I really liked that album. Like it's if we were reviewing that today, it would not be getting a 5, I guess I'll say. And I think it is a very different sound, but the songs in that are long, but they feel like they do develop and they do go places.
Yeah.
In a kind of way that this doesn't. But yeah, that's a great album. This is just fine. So I think I'll give it a 5.
Cool. Tony made an interesting comment a minute ago about how it feels like he's kind of being unfair, and I feel the same way in that I feel like I've criticised this album more than praised it, even though I do like this album. But that's only because I'm picking every album that we're doing for this series, apart from one which we'll get onto. And when we're reviewing the Hounds of Loves and the Purple Rains and the Disintegrations and the Doolittles and all the other great albums we've got coming, I'm going to speak about them so glowingly and so positively that you guys are probably going to want to slap me in the face after about 5 or 10 minutes. And it's nice to be able to talk about something where I do have issues. I do have things about it that I'm, less of a fan of. Like I said, it feels like a painting in an art gallery when I'm listening to it. I respect the technique and the skill into crafting what I thought was well produced, technically challenging songs to perform, and I like that the album has its fair share of the more kind of head-banging songs that you can kind of rock along to with a mix of the more relaxing ambient songs like The Sheltering Sky. But for me, there aren't enough hooks, there isn't enough to immerse me, and frankly it can be a little bit annoying at times. Making music that's technically hard to play and I guess I don't know, artsy or abstract for lack of a better word, can leave you feeling pretty dejected about it, I think, and it's like you have to put effort into listening to it rather than it feeling effortless. And I'll mention this again, I don't like that the album ends with two pretty meh experimentals. Oh, it's so underwhelming. It's so underwhelming. But yeah, I've listened to this album a good 5 or 6 times. I still struggle to remember the sequencing. I still struggle to remember the kinds of things that happen in the songs while I'm not actively listening to them and making notes. And normally after 5 or 6 listens, the songs will have had enough of a mark on me that they stand out and they're memorable and distinct, and the flow of the album has really had an effect on me. But this hasn't happened here. Despite that, I still think it's pretty good. I like quite a lot of things about it. I think I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10.
I wish you'd tell us how you really felt about this final 2 tracks.
Yeah. I mean, I barely talked about it, didn't I? So.
We just riff about something else.
When you guys come round mine next time, you just see a darts board on my room that has The Sheltering Sky written right on the middle of it on the bullseye. Anyway, thanks guys for coming along. Thanks for listening to the album and
Wait, Ethan,
talking about it.
Are we doing the bonus feature?
Oh, no, because you don't know the song well enough. No, listen to it again and we'll do it on the next one.
Okay, all right. That's a tease for next time. All right. Thanks.
What are we picking next time, Ethan? Do you wanna tell us?
Yes, I am picking the best-selling album of all time. I'm picking Michael Jackson's 80s classic Thriller, and I really look forward to reviewing that with you guys on the next episode. Tune in then.